Welcome back to the We're Here podcast. I'm Paul.
And I'm Tony.
Today we're joined by Kathy Missel, the board president of Engle Theater. Engle is a community theater in Streator that has a list of alumni that's miles long. It's a part of the fabric of what makes Streator such a great and entertaining place to live.
I served with Kathy on the board at Engle for quite a few years, and she has such a unique history with the theater. I'm so glad we're able to talk with her today. It's a good one, so buckle up. It'll be great, and we'll see you in the podcast.
Welcome back to the We're Here podcast. We're here today with Kathy Missel, who is a Streator area native. Grew up with some family of mine, I found out just a few minutes ago. So that's fantastic. And she currently serves as the board president of a Streator landmark that's very near and dear to my heart and to Tony's heart, I know as well, to many people in our community, Engle Theater, which has been around since 1958. Mm-hmm. It is home to many community theater actors, players, people that are backstage aficionados and just all sorts of community productions that have happened there over the years. So, Kathy, thank you for being here with us. Tell us a little bit about yourself, about your story, what you remember growing up in Streator and in the area.
Well, Streator's home, although we did talk a little bit earlier, and I did grow up in Long Point, but Streator was home base. That's where you came to shop. Streator's changed over the years. It used to be very heavily manufacturing oriented. Owens and Thatcher's was where everybody worked. It was kind of cradle to grave, and obviously that's changed a little bit. But what makes this community special is still there and still stronger than ever. And I think that's the heartbeat of the community, the people that really make things click. And you guys doing this podcast to celebrate some of the positive things about Streator just makes that even stronger, because there's a saying in a movie that I like, Pearl Harbor, not a great movie, but there's a quote when the Doolittle raid is going on that he says, "There's nothing stronger than the heart of a volunteer."
Oh, wow.
And that has always resonated with me, because the volunteers in this community, and probably a lot of the people that you have interviewed and will continue to do so, are just that, volunteers that care about something passionately and want to make something positive happen. So I think that's what the heartbeat of Streator is, the volunteerism.
We've interviewed very few people that get paid for what they do.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But we've heard that over and over again about the volunteerism here and how that really sets our community apart from so many other, I don't want to say all other communities, there are communities that have volunteerism, but that really is something that makes Streator a special place and has been that way for a long time. And you can say you've growing up here. And so how have you been involved in some of that? So let's talk about your involvement with the theater over the years. How have you been involved in Engle and what makes it home to you?
I saw my first show there in elementary school, and I immediately knew that this was something I wanted to be a part of. I'm the oldest of three, and so I was an only child for almost 9 years. And when my sister came along, all of a sudden I realized I had to be, look at me. So I guess falling into theater was kind of a natural thing for me. I was in a play in third grade and, saw Engle, and I knew I had to be a part of this. So I did my first show in 1981. And have been hooked ever since.
That's amazing.
The friends that you make out there, and Tony, I know you can attest to this. We were just talking about 10 years ago, we were both in Les Mis.
Yep.
The friendships you make are lifelong.
Oh, yeah.
And there's nothing better to be able to find your people.
Yeah.
And that's what theater does. And it doesn't matter if you're on stage. There's people that work backstage who are just as passionate. They just don't want to be in the limelight.
Yeah.
But it takes everybody to put on a production. And our patrons and the people in the community that support us, it's like the circle of life. We all depend on each other.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's some people that just have a love for theater, but they would never see themselves on stage, right? And so you mentioned patrons, and even the theater itself, the way it came about was through volunteers, through donations, a little bit of that story behind it is Pretty incredible. Do you mind sharing some of that and where some of that influence
No,
came from?
not at all.
I know we're kind of going a little off script
That's
already,
okay.
but I just think it's a
Improv.
fascinating story.
It's just a guideline.
Yeah.
Right.
But it actually started in 1958 and Donna Peterson, who was a former high school teacher at Streator High School, decided, wouldn't it be fun to put on a play? And she found out that the program director at WIZZ, it was at the time, the local radio station, Cass Pollock, had the same idea. So between the two of them, the whole idea of a theater was concocted. And the first show was Harvey, and it was actually presented at the Streator High School auditorium, which was very hot.
Yeah.
It wasn't air conditioned. So thanks to the generosity of Constance Engle, she donated the property to us out on Columbus Road. It needed to be restored. I believe it was originally an asparagus warehouse, is what I've heard.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
And a lot of people in the community refer to it as the barn. Since it's been lovingly renovated over the years, I prefer to call it a performing arts center because it is a beautiful multi-million-dollar facility.
But it's also big and red.
It is.
Like a barn.
Yes, but that's a tribute to our Usonian roots of the structure.
There you go.
So, but it started out very humbly, and I'd like to think that as president of the board, my role is to make sure that we stay true to our roots, stay true to our history, and yet have an eye for the future, so that we're around for a long time. Every time I go see the children and youth production, which was just Matilda Jr., I sit there and think, I want these kids here for a long time.
Yeah.
So it's a delicate balance, but it's a very important one.
Yeah, it becomes a lifelong community for them. We were talking earlier, about the friendships I made as a kid there. I'm sure you could say that same thing through your role, starting out young there.
It's really neat right now. There are 2 enormous productions happening. This will probably date the video a little bit, but currently Joseph and Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat is happening right now on stage, which is like 50 people. And my son is backstage working, doing stuff. So you've got all the people on stage and you've got all the people backstage all working together. And it's a great production, while simultaneously they're getting ready for Newsies, which I'm a part of.
Yay.
And the camaraderie, I went to my first rehearsal last night because I came in late to the game. The camaraderie that is palpable in that cast for Newsies is incredible. And there's a lot of people I don't know.
You will.
I will, but I mean...
They'll be your lifelong friends.
In community theater, sometimes you see a lot of the same people doing things, which is fine. I mean, that's what makes it a community theater. But this cast, Brian Steep just joined as well, and we were sitting there looking around and we're going, I don't know anybody in here, and that's awesome. All these young people wanting to get involved, that's the future of the theater right there.
Absolutely.
So it was exciting for me to be able to see that and to be a part of it again. It's a lot of fun.
I'm glad you're back.
Well, it's fun.
Welcome back.
So let's dive a little bit deeper into that community. What are some of the pieces? I don't think we have time for all of them, but everyone thinks about the actors. We mentioned backstage, but what else goes into that? The crew members. How have you seen people come together in that community to make a play? To have a play happen, and what makes Engle Lane unique as far as community theater and that community goes?
I'm going to pivot just a little bit because we've talked about actors and crew and audience and, our patrons. But what I'd really like to give a shout out to, and it changes over the years, but is the all-volunteer board of directors.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Because they serve without compensation and are charged with the task of running a business.
Yeah.
And not everyone a lot of our board members are theater people who may not be business first. We also have business people from the community as part of it, because without that oversight, we would not exist. And I go back to June 5th, 2010, when the tornado hit the theater.
Yeah.
And fortunately or unfortunately, depends on your point of view, I was president of the board at that time too. I remember hearing that the tornado had hit the theater, and I had just been president for 6 months, and I thought, ooh, this is not what I signed on for. And I said to myself, yes, you did. This is part of it, and as, as a person of faith, you're put in places for a reason. So I decided to try and learn the lesson from it. That board was incredible. We had an emergency meeting just several days later, 100% attendance. We had no place to meet at the theater, so we had a local business that let us meet there. And there were a lot of discussions about the best path forward. And not everyone agreed, but everyone had mastered the art of disagreeing without being disagreeable.
Yeah.
And when we voted to move forward, which ironically was exactly 2 months from the date that the tornado had hit, we had to wait for all the structural assessments and the estimates. So when we had that board meeting and voted to move forward, it was an amazing experience. And I give credit to that board and all the boards over the years who have sometimes had to make some really tough decisions.
Yeah.
And I look at the board during COVID, when we had to shut the theater down, and unfortunately that was devastating. We called it the longest intermission ever, but because we own our own beautiful facility, we still had bills to pay. We had utilities and insurance and taxes, and it's like, ooh, we have no revenue.
Yeah.
So thankfully we had built up the reserves since the tornado depleted them, and now we're in the process of having to do that again because of COVID. But I think the board is a very, they're unsung heroes, in my opinion, as far as what they do and what they contribute. And what they do is not always popular, but necessary.
Yeah. Well, thank you for pointing that out. And so just so our listeners have a reference, I mean, some of them may not be local. Obviously, EF3 tornado, I think, came through Streator 2010. What were some of the hurdles from both the tornado and then later on with COVID that you guys did have to, can you unpack some of those things and some of the leadership challenges that came along with leading through a crisis twice now?
Yeah, twice. I think that the biggest difference between the two incidents is that the tornado was very visible. There were pictures all over of what had happened, and they went far and wide. So, Engle alumni and people stepped up in a big way. COVID, unfortunately, impacted everybody. And you don't have those tragic pictures to tug on the heartstrings. And it's been a little more difficult to navigate the COVID and the post-COVID world because audience habits have changed. They got used to streaming and sitting at home in their pajamas and watching whatever they wanted. So we're still working very hard to change people's habits and have them experience live theater, because the beauty of it isn't just what's on stage. It's that you're in a room, experience it with everybody else. And there's research that talks about how people's heartbeats tend to, mimic each other. And there's a sense, it's community theater, but the audience is that community. The audience feeds off of their reaction. And I think, the cast definitely feeds off of that audience reaction.
Oh, it's night and day. When you're doing Tech Week in front of nobody, but you're running the full show, it's completely different once you get any kind of audience in there.
Yeah.
Like everything just comes alive.
Yeah.
That's why at the beginning of Tech Week, you're always like, I don't know how this is ever going to work. I don't understand how this is. Nothing's working. Then people start dropping in to watch during Tech Week, and all of a sudden people just come alive.
The energy that it
it's
gives
there.
you.
Yeah, there is a different energy about it.
So you're right. You've got the community of the people that have worked on this thing for 2 or 3 months together for night after night, and then you add the community of the people coming to watch it and experience what you're doing, and it just brings everything to life.
It's much different than just watching something on your screen, because you can't interact with that.
Nope.
So there's a beauty to it. But
there is, and it makes the challenge worth it. It makes all the challenges worth it. That beauty of bringing people together and engaging. There's engagement to it.
Yes.
It's one thing to stare at a screen and laugh at it, but when you're telling a joke and you hear human laughter in return, and it changes something about you. It changes.
You remember why you put in those 6 to 8 weeks of rehearsal. It's like, oh yeah, this is the reward.
The best thing is having to hold a line until the laughter stops.
Yeah.
And then continue.
Yeah.
Like that's the best feeling.
Yeah.
Just to be like, I'm going to let them laugh for a second.
Yeah.
And that little bit of fourth wall break, you're like holding it and looking at the audience, and there's just that you just can't get that from a screen. It just doesn't exist online.
No, not at all.
So what a beautiful thing to be a part of. So I guess, is there anything else you want to share about the community, the people, any other unsung heroes that you can think of, or
there are so many. The people. When I talked about our history, not just the founders, but the early performers. And I feel like they set the stage for what I wanted to be when I became, an Engle Lane person. And now some of those people that I looked up to so highly are now some of my closest friends. At the beginning of the year, we had the Sondheim Review, with some Engle Lane alumni who I just thought, the sun rose and set on them, So to be able to see that group of people sing together and entertain our audiences as kind of a preview to the season was just a lot of fun. So, and the people in the community, even if you just like our page on Facebook and share the information, anything that, can support what we do. We often hear, I didn't know you guys were there. This is our 67th year.
I don't know where you've been.
Yeah. This is a landmark. You could find yourself on the map by it.
But it's, I told you before we started, I call it my happy place, as do several other, people that I know both on the board and in cast and stuff. It's our happy place. And a lot of times when I come into town on Route 18 and about 7 miles out or so, you can see the lights, and there's just this sense that comes over me.
Yeah.
That's my theater.
Yeah.
Even though I perform in other places, because my motto is half stage will travel.
Yeah.
And you've performed in other places too, but there's just something about Engle Lane that's home.
Yeah.
You walk in those back doors and you're just like, oh, it smells right.
Yeah.
It smells like home. It's very strange.
And I have had the pleasure of taking people through just touring the theater, because everybody's very curious about our building, and even friends who have worked in New York, come in and they're like, one of my friends who is the casting director for Festival 56 and who had worked in New York, Laura, walked in and said, I have space envy. Because we can rehearse 3 shows simultaneously, and no show really needs to know that the other one is there.
It is. It's like the TARDIS inside.
It is. It's bigger on the inside than it is on the outside.
Yeah, most people see only the lobby and the auditorium and the hall where the restrooms are, but when you open that backstage door and people see,
dressing rooms and green room and prop loft and costume room and
dance hall,
two rehearsal spaces at least up there. It's incredible.
Yeah.
And that was the beauty of the tornado. We did not have to change the footprint. So we were able to rebuild and improve, based on that footprint. But the building is just incredible, and it's something that as a board member and board president, I take that very seriously, keeping that place going. So, for the next generation.
Right.
And I think for a community our size to have that well outfitted of a facility and that much space, it is unique for a town our size to have something like that. So it really is a treasure that has come about because of the generosity of volunteers and patrons and board members and just so many people being generous with their time and their treasure. So,
and the theater is a draw. It draws people to the community.
Yeah.
Oh yes, I just did a presentation with Tracy Ritko, another board member who's our accountant for the theater, and we did a presentation to the county board requesting funding from the ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act. And, again, I think we were kind of a surprise to some of them, but we talked about the connection to the community and how important it is. And we also we did some research and talked about how tourism dollars flow into the community, because when I have people coming from out of town, they'll get a hold of me, where's a good place to go eat before the show?
Absolutely.
And so we're bringing tourism dollars into Streator, into the county, and raising awareness for this beautiful community.
Anyone that's in a show that is in it, and it is doing a part in one of the shows, is going to bring in family from wherever. Like, none of my family lives around here, but if I'm in a show,
they're going to be here.
They're going to come and see it. So, and they're going to say, "Well, let's go eat somewhere." So it's very true. Like, it's bringing tourism to town. Like, that's what it's there for. And I was thinking just a moment ago, it's not unsung because the theater does a really good job of thanking them, but there are a lot of organizations that donate space, funds, props to the theater for just about every show.
And you guys here at Central Church of Christ have been wonderful partners to us. We've been hosted here for rehearsals when it's show week, because you can't rehearse when somebody else is doing a show on stage. So
That was not a shameless plug.
Yeah.
No, they did not ask me that. But I was here last year for Fox on the Fairway rehearsals. You open the doors and welcome us, and then the light board that you recently donated to us when you upgraded your own system. Those things we appreciate so much, and there are other people in the community that help us out with that. The Deacon Family Foundation, they're huge supporters of the children and youth production and want to make sure that the theater's around a long time to see these young performers, grow up and become old performers, hopefully, if they return to the community after school.
Well, and the connection between the high schools, the community. I mean, I think all local schools have some connection in some way. Even if it's just publicizing shows and children's productions and things like that, getting kids connected. Let's talk about that a little bit. How have you seen, obviously in your own life, I've experienced it as well, the difference that theater has made in the lives of younger people. We talked a little bit about that next generation coming up, but what difference do you see theater, community theater especially, making in the lives of young people, especially at Engle Lane?
That's a great question, and I think we were talking earlier about the pandemic, and you remember how the world just shut down and kids were doing school on Zoom, and it was quite a long time where there was no social interaction. That's what you get in theater. And you learn so many things from theater. And I found it ironic that after the tornado, the two things that were hit were primarily the theater and the ball fields.
Yeah.
And you think of those as total opposites, but they're really not. Because over the years, sports has been talked about as that's where you learn teamwork and this. So is theater.
Yeah.
You learn teamwork at theater. Whether you're an actor or you're a crew member, you're all on equal footing. And mistakes happen, and you just jump in and cover and do the best you can. And so I have always said that not every child's an athlete. I grew up before Title IX, but I know I wouldn't have been an athlete even if that was the case. I'm not coordinated. My teamwork was in theater, and I think that translates so well as kids move through school, move into the workplace. Those are skills that are transferable that they learn in the theater. And I think the biggest thing we learn is empathy. And, the political climate that we're in right now, we don't seem to have a lot of that. So empathy. Come to the theater and make yourself a better person.
Yeah. I enjoy the, I don't know, inclusivity, if that's a word, that happens in the theater, at least that I've seen. You have people from all different walks of life, rich, poor, everything. And when you get into a production, all that kind of goes away.
Yeah.
You can just work on this thing together, make it the best thing you can. Again, watching those kids in Newsies last night, I'm like, man, these kids are having a blast. And
they are, and they're learning.
And I feel like they all feel like they're someplace safe.
Yes.
And where they're accepted. Engle Lane's really good about including persons with special needs.
Yeah, different
in
abilities.
Productions, different abilities, and I think that's wonderful because those people should be accepted as much as anybody else.
One of the favorite things that we've done that we're hoping to bring back was the Penguin Project.
I was just going to mention that.
Before COVID, and then COVID hit, and that was devastating. But I went to the introductory meeting, and Penguin Project is theater.
I was going to say, can you describe that?
Sure, I'm assuming that everybody knows, but it's based out of Peoria, and it's a theater project that's been replicated across the country, and it's for children and young adults with, I like to say, different abilities. I don't like to say disabilities, but they can be challenged in some way, and they're paired with a mentor who is there with them but the performers with different abilities are the true stars. And I went to the introductory meeting, and everybody is used. It's not really an audition, but my heart just swelled with pride that our theater was doing something like that.
Yeah.
Every performance was sold out. And I didn't realize that there were barriers in theater. I grew up performing. The only barrier was whether or not I got cast, but I had the ability to do that. But I saw a young lady from the community, and I said, "Are you going to be on that stage?" And she grabbed me and hugged me, and she said, "Kathy, I'm going to sing." And it didn't dawn on me that we didn't have that experience. Not everyone had that experience. So that project, and even integrating them into regular productions, like is the case in Newsies, that is just so heartwarming to me. And I've seen, other performers go on and be in regular productions. They've learned through that project, stage presence, and everybody's willing to step in and help them if they need it.
Yeah.
So that's one of my favorite things, and we're hoping to be able to bring that back soon.
The experience of being in the audience for one of those productions is so unique as well. It's so different, and it's hard to describe. That there is a little bit of a different energy, and the I don't know. There's a different level to the humor even, and it really is. You say different abilities. I think that really hits it on the head, because we went. I think it was I can't remember the name of the production. Babes in Toyland, I think, maybe, or something like that. Or
yeah,
was that one of the ones
that wasn't the Penguin Project, but it was one of the youth productions. The two Penguin Project shows we did were Annie Jr. and Aladdin Jr.
Okay, Aladdin was the Penguin Project one that I was at. I think the other one was just a youth production, wasn't it? Yeah. But so it was Aladdin that we were at, and it's a different energy. The jokes hit a little bit differently, and it's so much fun to see, all these kids interacting with each other and having fun and laughing about, these. You could tell like they've got an inside joke between the two of them that's been happening over rehearsals for the last 2 months. You could just see that
the connections
coming through
that they make. The different abilities and their mentors.
Just amazing. It's just absolutely amazing to see. It's so hard to put words on it. How incredible that is.
So what perfectly encapsulated the Penguin Project for me was when they were doing Annie. I was backstage. I was a board member at the time, and I was backstage doing something. I don't even know what. But the gentleman that was playing, I can't remember the name, the main male, the father.
Daddy Warbucks?
Daddy Warbucks, thank you. Daddy Warbucks. The kid playing Daddy Warbucks was very nervous because it was the first show. Was back and forth in the back, just wasn't even sure if he was going to be able to do it and go on. And his mentor was another kid.
Yes.
Had to have been 15, 16 years old. Walked with him, talked with him, calmed him down. And then they went out on stage, and Daddy Warwick sat down at his desk, and the mentor, who's with him the entire time, just stood there and rubbed his back.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
The entire time.
To let him know he was there.
Yeah. And it was perfect. Like, the kid was perfect, but he just stood there, because the mentors, when they're on stage, they look down, they don't engage with the audience. That's what they're there for. They want their buddy to shine.
Yeah.
And so he was just standing there. No one could see it except if you were backstage. And he was just rubbing his back. Just rubbing his back the entire time. It was beautiful.
Fondest memory of Annie that you bring up was I would come home. I was working then, and I would come home from work, and my husband would take one look at me and said, "You've had a bad day. You need your penguins." And so I would go down to the theater and just watch a rehearsal because it brought me such joy.
Yeah.
And one night, one of our penguins and one of our mentors, brother and sister, had lost their grandmother that day. So the director got up and said that they would not be at the rehearsal, just to keep them in their prayers, and just doing some pre-show stuff before they started rehearsal. At that time, in walked the brother and sister, just a little bit late, and the sister had been mentoring Annie, the lead. And Annie was up on stage, and she saw her mentor coming up the aisle. I'm going to cry. She immediately got down, met her halfway up that aisle, and the roles were reversed.
Oh, wow.
It was like the penguin became the mentor.
Oh, wow.
She saw something that her friend needed and delivered it. And that's the connection that these young people have after a performance like that.
Well, I hope you guys are able to bring that back, but I also understand doing it when everybody's ready for it.
Yeah.
Because it's a huge undertaking,
Right.
and it takes a lot of people, so you got to do it when the time is right. But I hope that's something the theater can bring back.
I know that the board has talked about wanting to do it for some time, and we're getting closer. But coming out of COVID, so much of what we had to focus on was finances. Quite honestly,
Yeah.
So with that in mind, the challenges of the future, maintaining not just maintaining, but also expanding and growing, community theater and Engle Lane and the impact that it has on the community. What does that look like? How do you expand that interaction and also support that next generation as they're growing up into theater and they're someday going to be taking over the reins? And how do you kind of expand now, but also prepare the soil for them to grow as well in the future?
I think the key, and you touched on it a little bit with Newsies, is to create a welcoming environment. And that's something that, again, starting out at Engle Lane, I took for granted. And then I performed a few other places. And I'm not saying that they were mean. That's not the case. But theater people get together, and, if you and I got together with some of the people from Les Mis, we'd be reminiscent about, wasn't that great? And maybe you were here and you were no part of that, and you feel a little excluded.
Like a little bit on the outside.
A little bit on the outside. So I have become much more aware of when I go to auditions, particularly at Engle Lane, whether I'm auditioning or if I'm just there as support. If I see somebody new, I like to go over and introduce myself. And I said, so glad to see a new face. When you're done, would you like a tour of the theater? What can I do? And someone who was on the board recently said, you were the first person I met because you came over to me at auditions and introduced yourself. Yeah. I took it for granted because I want to help create that environment. But we just have to continue to pick shows that twofold people want to be in and people want to see. And you mentioned Joseph, perfect example of both. 50 people on stage and nearly sold out houses every night. We've had to add another show. I mean,
I haven't seen that since Les Mis.
No, that's
on that scale. We've had good selling shows over the years, but those two shows were special.
That's been phenomenal. So that's a delicate balancing act, but every year when I go see the youth production, I look at those performers from the tiniest ones up through high school and think, we have to make sure we're here for them. Yeah. And so to create that welcoming space, that safe space that you alluded to be yourself and fly your freak flag if you have one. And, because most theater kids, we're kind of the little oddballs, grow up in school, you're a theater kid's like, ooh, but this is the place where you find your people, you find your community. And I would just encourage the people in the community, if you haven't been there, if you're one of the people that say, oh, I didn't know you were there, come out and see what it's all about. And you can volunteer to usher, you can work concession stands, and perhaps you might be interested in being on the board, backstage, sewing costumes. I mean, there's something for everyone to do, and the sense of community and the friendships you make are priceless.
Oh, yeah, and it'll suck you right in. Yeah. Like I auditioned for Les Mis and got an ensemble part, and I was real happy to do it. And we were in the dressing room, and Rob Tyne said, hey, have you ever thought about being on the board here? I was like, no.
Never crossed my mind.
I've never been here before.
Well, whoever thinks about being on a board,
I know.
though,
it's like, no. And he said, well, I think you should. I think you do well. I'm like, maybe. And I was there for 6 years.
Yeah.
And it was great. But it was just one of those things where the theater just sucks you right in.
And we're happy to hear that from people like you, and it's just such a special place. It's my happy place.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. What are some of the challenges that the roadblocks that you see in the future that they need to overcome as a board, as a theater, as a community for community theater to grow? How do you want to address those? Maybe what's a good way to get over some of those roadblocks?
Coming out of COVID has been the biggest challenge. People's theater going habits have changed, and people make their decisions at the last minute. Where, I think back in the day, I hate to use that expression because it's like, oh, she's old. But back in the day, it was prestigious to have your night at the theater. People would go to Elks for dinner and then come to the theater. And so we sold so many season tickets. Those sales have dropped, even though that is the best value by far, because people don't necessarily want to commit. So our season ticket sales used to sustain us. Now we're finding that we're more reliant on grants. We're writing for more grants, and the Starbuck Country Community Foundation has been very generous to us, and we appreciate those opportunities. But we never thought about grants in the past because we were so self-sustaining. So we're trying to change habits and develop a culture of, let's go to all the shows and save money while doing it. So, you can see 6 high-quality productions for as little as $70. You can't do anything else.
You can't go see a movie, one movie for that.
For $70,
I love theater, and I'll go to New York, I'll go to Chicago, and you're never paying under $100 a ticket.
Plus your travel, and the time off of work. If you're working, you have to take time off to work to travel, and it's all right here. So
my husband's a great example. I've tried dragging him to Chicago to the theater, and it's just not his thing. But Engle, he will not miss. Because that's our friends and family.
Yeah, right.
And he loves seeing people that he knows on stage. And bless his heart, the first show of the season, Grumpy Old Men, I was in that, and he helped build the set, and he worked backstage, so...
Another thing, another hidden gem is spouses.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. because it's like, okay, I'm doing this, and so are you.
Family of cast and crew, yes.
Oh, and the children, the kids that get involved. I mean, we had quite a few crew members who were cast members or backstage members, kids, and they were great. So we're trying to change that perception that there is value in theater. I think that's our biggest hurdle, is to change people's habits back to where they were, and we have work to do on that. We have to deliver productions they want to see, as we've said, and try and communicate the value. And not just the value you get from seeing the production, but that sense of community. Yeah.
Well, I think you've done a great job of communicating that here, and hopefully if anybody's listening to this and is thinking, well, how can I get more involved in my community in Streator, or if you're in the area, and how can I find quality entertainment, that doesn't break the bank? I think community theater, whether you're within driving distance of us or if getting involved in your own community, is a great way to do that. And supporting local people, local economy, and and plus it's just a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun on top of it. So.
And after the tornado, when we had this great outpouring of support, it occurred to me that community theater is part of the community when the community wants it to be. Yeah. And it's obvious for 67 years the community has wanted us here. Yeah. So we just have to continue to build on that through the challenges of post-pandemic and, the economic situation that, people have only so much disposable income, and I recognize that. But I do think we provide a good value, and exposing your children to theater is very, very wonderful. And we do it at a very affordable.
To the worth of the community, the value of the community, through volunteerism, through hard work, but also just through a lot of fun too. So,
it is. Yeah.
So, well, Kathy, thank you so much for being here with us. Is there anything else you want to share with our listeners? How can they get involved? How can they, where do they go, share the address of the theater and, and where to find it if people can't find it on the map or anything like that?
Well, we're at 1012 Columbus Road. Look for the big red building, and our box office number is 815-672-3584. If you have any questions, you can leave a message, or, if no one's in the box office, but if it's something you want to know about the theater, they'll definitely get a hold of me, and I will be getting a hold of you, because it's, like I said, it's my happy place, and I'd like it to be yours too.
And they can also check out the website.
Yep.
Website, englelane.org, because we are a not-for-profit. And then we also have an Engle Lane Theater Facebook page where you can, follow us and see what's going on as far as upcoming shows. And, all the shows for this year are cast, but this week we're announcing the next season.
Yay.
So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah,
and
so
we're
by
looking ahead to
time
2025.
this is out, those will be out. So we'll put the links to those in the description of the podcast as well, so people can find that. So, well, Kathy, thanks again for being here with us.
Thank you. This is a great idea.
Being a great part of our community and keeping something that's amazing and both near and dear to both of us.
Thank you both. This is amazing,
so.
and appreciate the opportunity to tell the Engle Lane story. It's a great one.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us for the We're Here podcast, and we'll see you next time.